In an era where the world is ruled by sword and blood, the Roman Empire stands as the greatest power that cannot be ignored. Military banners flutter in the wind over distant lands, the sound of troops pounding the ground like the sound of war never ceases. In the chaos and bloodshed, there is a place where one man is forging his own destiny. He was not born a king. He was born a soldier, a man who knew that power came not from blood, but from victory. On the battlefield, he learned to read men by the sound of their dying breath, to know when to command and when to kill without hesitation. War made him, as fire makes iron. Victory after victory made his name famous among the troops. The soldiers respected him not because of his position, but because he was always at the forefront. He walked on blood like a man who knew the way. In the eyes of the troops, he was not a commander, he was destiny. In the capital, the Roman Senate was looking at him with secret fear. His victory was gaining the admiration and support of the people. And when the people began to love a man more than the law, that was when the empire began to crumble. He was called back to the capital as a hero. The streets were filled with people, voices of praise like waves of the sea. But behind the smiles and the respect, there were some eyes that were calculating time and opportunity. Little did anyone know that day that the victory that brought him to power would also place him in the greatest danger. The war had given him power, but power would come at a price. And that price was blood. The war on the battlefield is over, but a new war is beginning within the stone walls of the capital. It is no longer a war of swords, but a war of minds and calculations. In the Roman Parliament, the sound of the people's praise became terrifying. The people who were called heroes were becoming something above the law. Some members of Parliament began to ask themselves quietly, are the people still listening to the Parliament, or are they listening to a man? Rumors spread like fire under ashes. It is said that the army is more loyal to him than the Republic. It is said that if he wanted to, he could become king without asking anyone. As night falls, the secret gathering begins. Some men sit in the shadows, their faces drawn with tension and fear. They no longer talk about praise. They talk about defending the Republic. One person said, "If we don't do anything, tomorrow the law will be meaningless." Another person replied, "And if we do, blood will flow." In the midst of that silence, a decision was made that would change history forever. Not by army. Not by war. But by action. And the hero, yet not realizing that his most dangerous enemy is not on the battlefield, but around him. A morning dawned over the capital of Rome, like any other ordinary morning. The sunlight hit the stone walls and the cobblestone streets, which were covered with the footprints of travelers. The city looked quiet, as if nothing had happened. The hero walked across the street with a firm step. His face was calm, secure, and full of confidence. For him, this was just another day, a day when the nation needed his services and decisions. He didn't know that as he walked forward, there were many eyes watching from a distance. Some people stood under stone pillars. Some people hid in the shadows. They followed at just the right distance, not too close, not too far. The hero did not turn back. He did not doubt. Because for him, the enemy always had a clear face, on the battlefield. But he did not yet know that the most dangerous enemy was not holding a sword in front of him, not standing in the enemy line, but was walking at his feet. In the city he thought was the safest. That morning, it seemed ordinary. But betrayal was walking with him. Step by step, step by step. The hero paused for a moment in front of a large building. Tall stone pillars stood ready to receive the morning sunlight. As if everything in this city had always stood there, unchanging. A member of parliament approached him. With a calm face, a soft voice. Like another casual invitation. To invite the hero to join the discussion. For the future of the Republic. The hero listens respectfully. He smiles lightly. And responds confidently. For him, this is a call to duty. Not a sign of danger. In the distance, some eyes continue to follow. They do not approach. Nor retreat. They know that time is working for them. The sword has not yet been drawn, the knife has not yet been raised, but the decision has already been made. The hero turns and walks forward, towards a place called safety and law. Unknowing that the next step is leading him to a fate already prepared for him. The hero walks forward without looking back. His steps are firm and confident, like a man who believes that the law will protect him. And that the power he wields is legitimate and righteous. A large door opened before him. High stone walls blocked out the sounds of the city behind. Sunlight was slowly absorbed into the shadows. As if the outside world was being left behind. Behind. Some members of parliament stopped walking. No one called his name. No warning sound. Only silence. That was heavier than all the noise. The door closed. Not with a loud sound. But with a decision. Inside, the hero thinks he is entering a place of law and safety. But history has already learned that the door was not closed to protect him, but to prevent him from escaping. As the door closed, silence enveloped the entire building. The wind rustled along the stone walls. Like a warning. That came too late. The hero stood there. Eyes staring ahead. Heart beginning to know. Something was wrong. Not that the enemy was far away. Not that the war was outside. But danger was closer than he thought. Light footsteps. The sound of clothes rustling. Some people approached. Not soldiers. Not enemies on the battlefield. But people he had once believed. Loyal to the law. There were no screams. No long struggle. Only wide eyes. And the sudden realization that power born of war cannot always live within the law. The hero tried to speak. But the words were swallowed by silence. 1 second destroyed everything. He had built his entire life. When he fell, no one called his name. Only the stone walls, which stood as if nothing had happened. And on that day, the Republic lost a hero, without war, without proclamation. But at the hands of those who called themselves the defenders of the law. Silence fell like a thick fog, no screams, no sound of swords clashing, only the sound of heavy breathing in that stone building. The hero still stood there, slumped, face down, body heavy as if all the power he had ever held had abandoned him. He began to realize that the place called law was not a shield but a door that had closed behind him. The members of parliament stood around, no one speaking, but their eyes saying everything. In those eyes, there was no respect, no gratitude, only fear that had turned into determination. The hero understood in that second that he was not being judged by any crime, he was being judged by his own fame. The victory that had once brought the people's praise was now evidence against him. In that silence, history was writing a new line in blood, before anyone had even drawn a sword. When the great gates finally closed, the outside world knew nothing. The city was still awake, the markets were still open, the people were still talking about victory, unaware that their heroes were losing everything behind those stone walls. There was no proclamation, no shouting, just the silence that history loves when it changes direction. After that day, his name was spoken only in low tones, some called him a hero, some called him a threat. But no one could deny that he had shown what the entire empire feared most. That power born of war could become the enemy of law, and law could become the instrument for crushing those who were more powerful than it. The Roman Empire still stood, but not as it had been. From that day on, people learned that the most dangerous enemies come not from outside its borders, but from within, where power and fear meet. And history, never forgets the man who shook it, even if they try to hide his name behind stone walls.